Joining me today on Impact Catalyst. Catalyst is the Chief Strategy Officer for Lutheran Services Florida, Amelia Fox. Welcome.
Thank you, Joe. I'm excited to be here.
LSF, as we'll call it from now on, is an amazing array of services. It's one of those sort of things where you peek through a little hole and see this whole world inside of services and impact and footprint from all around Florida. So for folks that aren't familiar with LSF, can you give us a brief 101 on the behemoth of an organization?
Absolutely, and it is a little bit of a behemoth. We've actually been in business 40 years, so this is our 40th year here. And just quickly, we were started back in 1982, really with three missions coming together, working with refugees coming out of the Cuban Mariel boat lift crisis and Haitian refugees. We operated and still operate to this day a Head Start Center in Belglade, Florida, Pepe, and a youth shelter, which we also still operate to this day, Littman, over in Broward. So those three missions kind of came together to form what was in Lutheran Ministries, Florida, and changed over a few years later to Lutheran Services, Florida. We have grown tremendously over those last 40 years and now serve really roughly 1 in 50 Floridians through a variety of our programs. We focus primarily on struggling families and youth in crisis, and that can be through our early education programs that are focused on helping make sure kids are ready for kindergarten. A lot of work in the counseling and youth space in terms of truant youth and runaway youth and helping them get back into school, youth in the foster care system, families that are at risk of entering the foster care system. We do still a lot of work in the refugee services space as well, and helping families who have fled here, fleeing something. And we really feel like, when they're here, we're here to serve them and help them, get their life together and to kind of strengthen that community. And then we also do a lot of work in the substance abuse and mental health space. So I probably didn't catch it all, but there's like you said, it is a big organization. We've got about 1,500 people throughout the state.
And when you talk about how it formed initially, has that sort of defined how you've grown in that you sort of offer, a back-end infrastructure, sort of, a skeletal system to plug different services into? And, because it sounded like those first initial three kind of existed and you sort of glued them together for benefits, economies of scale type of benefits. And is that how these other services have come to be, or are they generated internally instead of?
No, really, the economy of scale is exactly right. And I just sort of for reference, my experience is private sector prior to coming to this. So, I look at LSF as, one of the big values of this umbrella is that by bringing in, we're 100% government funded, right? We're government contracts is the work that we do through state and federal contracts. But by bringing in the various contracts and the various services, we're able to find a lot of collaborative opportunities and a lot of crossover and get that benefit of reach and benefit of being able to leverage resources across the state to further our impact. So that is a lot of how the growth has happened. I'd say, to be fair, we're also somewhat opportunistic. When opportunities come and if we feel like we're able to do it and qualified to do it, we will certainly, try to take those services in.
And how centralized is that, that process? So it's almost like, you mentioned private sector, so you have sort of an M&A mindset where you can find organizations that are maybe offering great services, but would have a big upside to plugging into your administration. And then, obviously that probably reveals some holes in the supply chain of a child growing up or a family or whatever. And then, and that's where you can plug in by building your own programs. Is that kind of a fair way to look at the overview?
Sort of. I think it's a different way to look at it is that as grants become available, right? What a new program is coming out or a vendor is not performing where the government wants them to perform and they're looking for other vendors, that's really where we step in. Often we'll partner with the incumbent and sort of go hand in hand if it's a competitive type situation. Sometimes we're asked to step in and take over programs and take over grants. We do work hard to generate a web of partnerships in any of the communities that we're in. I can't think of the phrase, but we're not interested in sort of being the only one there, right?
Right.
Our goal is helping the people in crisis. And whether we're the lead or the subcontractor is sort of irrelevant for us as long as we're really helping the people in crisis.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about, grants as opportunities, the grant end of things takes care of the funding and sort of defining the project, but it doesn't necessarily take care of the awareness and getting constituents and getting folks to use the projects. So how big of a challenge is that as far as growing awareness for the services you provide? And sort of part two to that is, are you trying to brand out everything under LSF, or do you kind of attack each individual, each program?
Good question. So to the first part, the grant doesn't always and typically doesn't really, it's almost the myth, right, of these grants that they come partially funded. Right. So it funds what I kind of see, and this is sort of my layman's terms, but the bare bones of the service, right? We can get the service done, but there are pretty strict limits on many aspects of the grants. And so when they come in, so to your point of not funding the awareness and not funding getting some of the marketing, some of the work that's needed to make sure clients know we're there or to further the program, that's a big gap. And there's a big gap as well in our ability to be innovative and pilot and try new things. And so that part is kind of a core reason that I want to raise our awareness. We are an agency, like I said, about 1,500 people across the state, full of thought leaders, people who are experts in this space. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to do different strategic partnerships, different innovative ideas, but that's not funded in the grants. And so we want to infuse that piece in there. To your question on branding, we kind of look at LSF as sort of three main business units, I'll call them, kind of three general business areas. Our substance abuse and mental health work, where we are a managing entity. So in this space, the way that the Department of Children and Families funds this program for the uninsured and underinsured people who are experiencing substance abuse and mental health issues is they fund a managing entity who then funds the provider network in that area. So up in Jacksonville in the 23 county region, we are that managing entity. So we do a lot of work with those providers to help try to create new and innovative programs to address substance abuse and mental health work. So that's kind of one of our brands. Our LSF Head Start program is a second brand. And in that program, we're really working with families who are in poverty, in and about around the poverty limits, making sure that they have a place for their kids to go when they're 0 to 5 and preparing those kids to get them ready for kindergarten and making sure the family is ready to support the child through a lifelong learning so that it's not just a kind of daycare one and done concept. And then our legacy programs, and that's the kitchen sink of all the other social services work. And it's kind of it's our legacy because it's what we were originally founded on. So if you want to think of it from a branding side, that's loosely how we brand. We do try to be sure that LSF has a single culture across the state and a single brand. We do have a single vision, single mission. That said, programs also take on the flavor of their funder, which is fine and makes sense, and we appreciate.
So then, how does the aspiration to partner and develop, pilot and do some of your own things come to fruition? If you have this sort of go to the grant model, does this represent a new funding campaign initiative to do these sorts of things, or if we have a lot of our audience is other nonprofits, so this is a situation where they could reach out and look for ways that what they have and what you have might work together. So how does that sort of express itself?
I'd say yes and yes, with like all capital yeses in both of them. Definitely opportunity for funding and for investment in new partnerships. And definitely the opportunity to create new partnerships. I can give you an example of one that's real recent and it's been incredibly successful. We last November were approached by Westminster Communities, and it's a senior living organization that has, I should know, but 8 or so locations across the state. They, like a lot of companies, were struggling with staffing needs and making sure that they had people in a lot of the positions. They knew that so many thousands of Afghan refugees had come to the States and felt like there was probably an opportunity there. So they reached out to us And very quickly, we formed a partnership with Westminster that allowed them to work with our Afghan refugees that we were resettling here in Tampa, place them in positions that they were qualified for, everything from people in HR and dining and facilities and maintenance, all across the whole infrastructure. Not only did that help Westminster kind of win, right, that they have employees in these positions who were really, truly grateful and thankful to have the jobs, it helped us making sure that the refugees had employment. But Westminster also provided them housing at a real subsidized rate, either within their own property or helped them find housing and help them pay for that. So now we've got the families who have employment and housing, two critical things, right, for coming to the U.S. And then the ripple effect is that the residents of the organizations of the living facilities really took to this, and they've created English programs and things for the kids, and so it's created this just incredibly beautiful partnership that is, I hate to say win-win because it's so cliche, but it really is a win-win. And so looking for those kind of partnerships where it's, they have a need, we have a need, and we can match those needs.
Right.
And it can be with a nonprofit, but Westminster's, pretty sure a for-profit company. It doesn't have to be in a nonprofit setting.
That's fantastic. And a question popped in my head just because I think you're in such a unique position in that you are tied to government, you are a large organization yourself, also very entrepreneurial and seemingly nimble. So culturally, what's the vibe on bureaucracy? How do you do you attack it relentlessly? Is it just part of the game? And, it's some mix of patience and aggression, or, how do you, how does that taken?
So externally, the bureaucracies that we work with, right. And that's part of it. And we know how to do it. We are, I would say we are incredibly adept at responding to funder needs. And I've never seen people can move incredibly quickly to that. And I think that's an important skill to have in an organization like ours. Internally, and some of your business viewers will appreciate this, we were about a $30 million organization up through 2010-ish. And over the span of 3 or 4 years, we grew to $250 million in revenue. Now, I'll disclaim that to say it's 98% cost reimbursement and pass through. So there's no margins on this revenue, but just in terms of the volume of funding that came through, the staffing, the employment, and that hockey stick growth was pretty incredible. So one of the things that we've spent the last 6 years doing is kind of relentlessly avoiding creating bureaucracy, right? So it was very important for us to mature our business processes. It was how you run a $30 million organization is vastly different than how you run a $300 million organization. But that said, what we didn't want to do is create structures that didn't allow for things to get done. So, in the natural course of running businesses, those tend to build up. We tend to find them and try to simplify them and knock them down so that internally we can remain nimble. And I think that's, I feel like we're kind of at an inflection point where, like I said, we're very adept at responding to funder needs. If we can take that adeptness and take our nimbleness and start to form new partnerships and diversify that look and feel, our ability to help our clients beyond the contract, so to speak, is going to just multiply exponentially.
Yeah, that's great. And I find, and this is a bit of a nuance follow-up to that, is, a lot of times doing what you're doing with there's easy bureaucracy to trim, right? It's just processes where you sign it twice instead of signing it 3 times or whatever. But a lot of it is tied to risk mitigation, right? So a lot of the heavy documentation is, because of some weird lawsuit 16 years ago or whatever, or, that's how these rules stack up and these things stack up. So there has to be a cultural confidence that you have in the organization that you're willing to, not bog yourself down in that and just, to stand up for your processes and to stand up for your org and take a little bit of that risk. We walk that line at our foundation as well. And I actually quite enjoy it because I think it's I think it's one of the places, one of the fronts that sharp people can fight on and do some real good.
Yeah, you're kind of speaking to my daily life, and it's good, right? It's good work to do. We have, as you would imagine, it's partly the lawsuit. It's the audit requirements that not I mean, well, your financial audit's a piece, but the funder audits and monitorings. Our Head Start program, for example, is it might be the second most now regulated program of all of the federal programs. So it gives you a sense of the number of rules and regulations that are there. And, when you're working in that environment, you partly get very used to it, right? And you do the things that you need to do. What we are trying to do, and I think doing a really good job of it where we can, is streamlining that. And like you said, instead of signing 3 times, what if we sign twice with this sort of piece? Trying to not duplicate efforts and our, working to make sure that we do protect ourselves from a risk perspective, but that we don't become risk averse, right? That we, just because we look at risk and we manage risk and we actually have a whole heat map on risk, doesn't mean that we're risk averse. It means we're aware of the risks and we go into things mindfully. And I think that piece of it is a part that is making us become sort of stronger and stronger in our ability to collaborate, our ability to find crossover connections, our ability to sort of shed status quo and find those areas where we can kind of break free and be a little more innovative. And in fact, on that note, we just changed. We have 5 values that we live by. One of them for a long time was visionary. And we just shifted it to innovative because we wanted people to really feel like they could be innovative in their job, regardless of their job and how high or low it was in the hierarchy of jobs, that there's always something you can do to innovate and do it just a little better. And as long as we're doing that as an organization, we're going to move forward strongly.
Fantastic. Sounds like you have a pretty high quality board that supports all of that. So let's talk about the year ahead then. As we look at the adeptness with which you're operating, the ability to move into different directions and operate with skill. What would you like to see happen from a funding standpoint and from a program stand-up standpoint in the next 12 months? And perhaps people listening would want to plug into that.
A couple of things. We are, as I said, we're celebrating our 40th this year, right? So we're using this as a big jumping off point to increase our brand awareness and to try and find those business partners who want to come alongside us and work with us through sponsoring the 40th so that we can have some funding to explore new partnerships and new strategic avenues, and through partnering with us from a volunteer side or partnering with us to help us build our kind of ambassador community so that, as we're working on initiatives and working on projects, we're able to infuse more into our clients. And so that's sort of the year ahead at a big picture level. From a program side, we are continuing to grow organically. And so we're certainly keeping that. We are beginning to shift toward more foundation conversations where we can find the foundations that want to partner with us that will really allow us to implement new and different programs. So implementing a new behavioral management system in our group homes, for example, or implementing a program that allows us to do some crossover work between our foster care work and our refugee services work. And there's pieces on that. If you look at our impact overall, I mean, we serve thousands and thousands of Floridians a year, and when you look at that reach and that impact and the knowledge that we have of the communities where we're serving, there are organizations that can really benefit from that knowledge. I mean, I'll give you one sort of pie in the sky example, but if we have a company, a business that is looking to deepen their roots, say in a ethnically diverse community, right? In a community, if they want to, if they've got literally a diversity and equity and inclusion initiative that is putting them in new communities, we're in those communities, right? And so partnering with us and coming alongside us and doing something new and innovative can help our Head Start families, can help our refugee families, can help our families who are in crisis in the entering into or just about to enter into the foster care system. And the business can understand those communities better and achieve their missions better. So that's kind of my hope in the next year, that we're able to start testing those waters. We will continue to grow organically. We have a fabulous leadership team, and they get called daily for growth. And so, that part of it, I think, is an engine that is going, and it's going well. And we're managing the growth and managing the risk through that.
The website is lsfnet.org.
It is.
Make it appear on the bottom of the screen.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. It's, I feel like we sort of just scratched the surface, so we'll have to have you back again to dig in more specifically to some of the programs. But I think this is enough for folks to dig in a little bit to lsfnet.org and see the wide swath of services and people can plug in and whether they're using the services or supporting the services or partnering. A lot of opportunity and worth the time to dig in a little bit. Amelia Fox, Chief Strategy Officer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.